Hi, Charles Cherney here with The Real Deal and answers to essential real estate questions that come up in the Cambridge and Somerville marketplace where I work. So, number three today, should a seller set an offer deadline? This is a great question. And in the market in the last several years, which has been a hot market with properties moving quickly, often with multiple offers and selling for over asking, yes, an offer deadline makes sense. And so, generally speaking, in a hot market, I am a proponent of an offer deadline. So, if a new listing comes out on a Wednesday or Thursday, and there are open houses, say, for Saturday and Sunday, likely it makes sense to have an offer deadline the following Tuesday at 4 p.m. so that people then have the opportunity to see the house, say, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and even a portion of Tuesday. So nearly a week of exposure to the market for people to see it a second time. If perhaps someone's traveling, they get back to town, they have a chance to see it as well, and to organize their thoughts and organize an offer. So if you do set an offer deadline, you are not obligated to keep to it. You can, through your offer instructions, which is what I do, make known that the seller reserves the right to accept an early offer. In my offer instructions, I notify interested parties to alert me if they wish to be contacted if an early offer comes in. So look, it's not like in setting an offer deadline, a seller's necessarily looking for an early offer, but insofar as offers presented are to be conveyed to the seller by the listing agent upon receipt, if an early offer comes in and it's sent to the seller, and the seller is interested in considering accepting it before the bid deadline, it's best for offer instructions to be attached to the listing so everyone knows that this potentially could happen so that they're notified if an early offer comes in. If you get to Tuesday at 4 p.m., the announced offer deadline, and no offers come in, it's not the end of the world. You just simply remove the offer instructions from the listing in MLS and proceed forward with showings and offers to be considered as received. So there's really no penalty, in my opinion, in setting an offer deadline. And the value of setting one is it does establish a framework for a new listing where potentially multiple parties are going to be interested, and you want to afford those interested parties a chance to see it so that more than one offer can be considered by the seller at the bid deadline. Now, we can appreciate that if there's no offer deadline, that the first party in or one of the first parties in could decide to make an offer. And then the seller's in a difficult situation in that perhaps even before the first open house, they have an offer that they have to decide on. And they're concerned that they haven't really exposed the property to the market for a long enough period of time for other interested parties to get through. So, they could accept that offer that comes in early, and perhaps even the buyer doesn't know their mind because they've acted so quickly, and then they change their mind, and then it gets to be messy. So setting an offer deadline for a Tuesday afternoon for a new listing that comes on the week prior, say Wednesday or Thursday, makes complete sense. And if, as I said, it doesn't generate multiple offers or an offer acceptable to the seller, then the framework of an offer deadline can be removed. Some sellers have the mistaken notion, in my opinion, that they're best served by setting the bid deadline way out into the future, like 2 weeks out. It just doesn't make sense. A buyer who's ready, willing, and able and ready to go is going to get itchy and scratchy, even if they have to wait 3, 4, 5 days. That's a sufficient period of time for market exposure for buyers to make informed decisions as to whether they will bid. Now, every now and then there's an exception to this rule for certain properties that require additional due diligence by potential buyers because of the unique offering. It might be a development opportunity that requires people be afforded more time for due diligence, or there's limited access due to tenants. There could be certain factors at play that do push the bid deadline out beyond 5, 6 days and put it further into the future to give people time for due diligence. But generally speaking, a Tuesday afternoon deadline is sufficient. It gives people a couple business days before the weekend itself, and a day and a half after the weekend to get organized and make a decision regarding whether they're going to make a bid. Okay, number 2 today is the question of, does it make sense for a seller to have a second round of bidding? And I guess this question, of course, pertains to a situation where the seller has been so fortunate to receive more than one offer, so now they have multiple offers. And as the listing agent for the seller in this circumstance, I'm often asked by my seller to weigh in on the value of a second round of bidding. That is to say, to go back to one or more, well, actually, to go back to 2 or more parties and ask for highest, best, and last in a second round of bidding. Now, typically, in my experience, this happens about 50% of the time in a multiple offer situation. So in some instances, I'd say about half the time, in the first round, there's one offer that distinguishes itself clearly as the best offer, and the seller decides not to mess with perfection insofar as there's one offer that clearly stands out as the winner, and they choose to accept it. Other sellers feel, with everyone in the first round perhaps knowing they're in a multiple offer and everyone bidding strong, they just don't feel like it makes sense to push people again who've already pushed hard in the first round. That's a seller's decision ultimately, as it is in each and every case, as to whether there will be a second round. It's their property, their decision. But it is normal in a situation where there are 2 or more offers that are really similar and very close for the seller to tell me, as the listing agent, to signal a second round so that the marketplace can determine the highest and best offer by giving people a chance to improve. And so in a second round of bidding, buyers can decide if they're going to keep their offer as written on the table or improve it and submit an improved offer, or just exit from the bidding process. A second round of bidding is a test of the buyer's mettle to stay in the game and push forward and to emerge as the buyer. So it can be a valuable part of the journey to acceptance for a seller to have a second round of bidding. And it's interesting, sometimes, let's say you have 6 offers, you might decide, well, there's 2 offers that really stand out. Well, we should just invite these 2 parties into the second round of bidding. But I have found that it's best to include all parties in the second round of bidding. And more than once, I've seen someone either in last place or close to last place turn on the jets and improve their offer and emerge as the winner in the second round. So some people just need to know it's competitive, and is in fact the case that there is a second round of bidding to push pedal to the metal and come up with their highest and best offer. So I'm finding in my experience that if there is a second round of bidding, all bidders ought to be encouraged to consider resubmitting for the new offer deadline, usually the next day. Offers are confidential, and so people have to decide on their improved offer in terms of what they're willing to bid with their buyer's agent and resubmit. So as a seller, you do benefit in many instances in having a second round of bidding. And then number 1 of the 3 questions I wanted to touch on today: should a seller allow the buyer to have access to the property after offer acceptance? This is a great question. And in Massachusetts, it's a 2-step dance. There's the offer, which is replaced thereafter in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 business days with the signed purchase and sale agreement binding buyer and seller in the transaction. And the purchase and sale, or P&S for short, takes the place of the offer as the binding agreement between the parties. So in my experience, it is normal after the purchase and sale is signed for the buyer to be granted a certain number of opportunities to visit the property. It's not uncommon for that to be 3 visits. But what's a little out of the ordinary is that the buyer be granted access to the property again after signing the offer, but before the purchase and sale is signed. And so that's a situation where a seller has really the right to say no, because you could conceive of that additional visit almost as a sort of opportunity for the buyer to confirm they do want to move forward in the transaction and sign the purchase and sale. I mean, the due diligence period is meant to be up to the moment offers are presented, and upon offer acceptance, the buyer really needs to sort of toe the line and stay on side regarding access until after the purchase and sale is signed. That is really the golden moment in the transaction here in Massachusetts, when an additional deposit, typically 5%, is due. So, look, there could be contingencies in place between offer acceptance and purchase and sale, whereby the buyer has the right to enter the property, say, for example, with the home inspection contingency. So, what I'm talking about here is, should the seller allow the buyer access to the property after offer acceptance for purposes not agreed to in the signed offer? Now, look, once the purchase and sale is signed, it's not uncommon for a buyer to want to visit for measurements, for planning purposes with a contractor for work they plan to do after closing. There may be an appraiser who is needing access because the buyer is getting a loan. There are a variety of reasons that make complete sense for the buyer to access the property after purchase and sale is signed, and the purchase and sale agreement will often include language specifically addressing this point to allow for it. But what we're talking about here is whether the seller should allow for unscripted access not agreed to in the offer between offer acceptance and purchase and sale. And typically, sellers hold the line on that and say no. Now, again, there are always exceptions to this, and there can be cases made for allowing for access. But again, generally speaking, sellers hold the line and wait until the P&S is signed before getting the buyer back in there for any reason not agreed to in the offer prior to P&S. So hopefully these answers to these questions have been useful to you as you consider selling your home in Cambridge or Somerville. I'm a top residential real estate in these communities, and I welcome the opportunity to help you sell for the best price. And if you're looking to buy the right home, be in touch by text, telephone, or email. My name is Charles Cherney, and I welcome the opportunity to connect with you and be of service. Be in touch.